In 1966, England reached the top of world football. Fans believed it was the beginning of a dynasty. Instead, it marked the start of nearly 6 decades of heartbreak. Every generation has dreamed of bringing football home, but every World Cup has ended in disappointment.
Good morning, guys, and welcome to Flop Files. Today, we're diving deep into one of the most agonizing phenomena in international sports. How does a nation with such profound footballing heritage, the very inventors of the modern game, go 60 years without touching that golden trophy?
Here is our roadmap for today. We'll start with the weight of 1966, then handballs and penalty heartbreak. After that, red cards and ghost goals, followed by the golden generation fails. Next, modern margins of defeat, and finally, will it ever come home?
Section 1. The weight of 1966. Setting the stage for heartbreak.
When Bobby Moore lifted the Jules Rimet Trophy after a 4-2 extra-time win over West Germany, it was supposed to be the dawn of an empire. Instead, it became a heavy anchor. That single glorious afternoon created an unparalleled standard of expectation that would completely suffocate every single squad that followed. This timeline charts a relentless cycle of dashed hopes. From the collapse in Lyon to the ghost goal in South Africa, every 4 years the nation builds itself up with immense optimism, only to be torn down in increasingly dramatic and agonizing fashion.
Let's start right after the glory. In 1970, England arrived in Mexico as the reigning champions and undeniable favorites. They had what many argued was an even stronger squad than 4 years prior. In the quarterfinal against West Germany, playing in the scorching, unearthly heat of Lyon, they went 2-0 up. They were absolutely cruising. But then, disaster struck. Goalkeeper Gordon Banks was suddenly ruled out with severe food poisoning just hours before kickoff, forcing backup Peter Bonetti into the net. Then, with England seemingly in total control, manager Alf Ramsey made the fateful decision to substitute a dominant Bobby Charlton just to save his legs for the semi-final. Well, the structure collapsed almost immediately. West Germany pounced on the shift in momentum, and England ultimately lost 3-2 in extra time.
Which leaves us with a painful, lingering cliffhanger for this era. What if Alf Ramsey hadn't subbed off Bobby Charlton? Would his experience and unmatched control in the midfield have kept Franz Beckenbauer at bay? Could England have maintained their lead, marched to the final, and altered the entire course of their footballing history?
Section 2. Handballs and penalty heartbreak, the 1980s and 1990s.
Now, the modern trauma of the England fan truly began in 1986 with a quarterfinal against Argentina. This was a match loaded with intense political and emotional weight, coming just 4 years after the Falklands War. But on the pitch, England faced a totally unique problem. Consider this staggering statistic: 56%. That is the percentage of Argentina's total attacking output, shots and chances created, that Diego Maradona was directly involved in during the 1986 World Cup. He was a one-man wrecking ball, completing a tournament record 53 dribbles. England's plan was simply to have whoever was nearest press him. It wasn't nearly enough.
In the span of just 4 minutes of absolute madness, Maradona shattered England's dreams. First came the infamous Hand of God, where he leaped and brazenly punched the ball past goalkeeper Peter Shilton, a goal the officials completely missed despite fierce protests. Then, literally just 4 minutes later, the goal of the century. A dazzling, mesmerizing solo run from his own half, leaving 5 elite English players trailing in his wake before slotting it home. England lost 2-1, victims of both staggering injustice and undeniable historical genius.
Fast forward 4 years to Italia 90, England reached the semi-finals for a rematch against West Germany. It was a fiercely contested, gripping match, but the defining image is of a young, brilliant Paul Gascoigne in tears. After receiving a yellow card that would rule him out of the potential final, Gaza famously wept right on the pitch, and his emotional state basically captured the mood of an entire nation. The match went to a penalty shootout, the very first of many for England. Stuart Pearce and Chris Waddle both missed their spot kicks. England were out. Gaza famously summed up his devastation afterwards, saying his bottom lip was like a helicopter pad.
So, looking back at this chapter, we have to ask, would England have won the 1990 final if Gaza hadn't been booked, keeping his focus razor sharp? What if those missed penalties had just been an inch lower? Could things have been different?
Section 3. Red cards and ghost goals. Individual scapegoats.
Entering the late 90s and early 2000s, we see an era where a desperate nation began seeking individual scapegoats for their collective heartbreak. The spotlight and the crosshairs fell heavily on single moments of madness or pure misfortune.
Take the 1998 World Cup last 16 against Argentina. A 23-year-old David Beckham made a split-second, foolish decision to kick out at Diego Simeone after being fouled. He saw a straight red card. Now, England fought valiantly with 10 men for the rest of the game, but ultimately lost, again on penalties. The nationwide backlash against Beckham was vicious and unprecedented. Effigies of the midfielder were literally hung outside pubs, death threats were made against him and his family. The sheer scale of the abuse left him, in his own words, an absolute mess and clinically depressed.
Then, in 2002, tragedy struck from 35 yards out. England were facing a formidable Brazil side in the quarterfinals, when a young Ronaldinho stepped up to a very wide free kick. Instead of crossing, the ball looped bizarrely high over an unprepared David Seaman and dropped perfectly into the top corner. To this day, former England players like Sol Campbell call it a fluky miss-hit cross that just got lucky with the wind, while Ronaldinho insists he saw Seaman off his line and went for it intentionally. Either way, England were out once again. So what if Seaman had just taken one step back? Could England have halted the eventual Brazilian champions and changed their fate?
Section 4. The Golden Generation Fails. Unfulfilled Potential. Quick pause before we get into this. If you're enjoying this documentary, subscribe to Flop Files and share this video with a football fan. We uncover the stories behind football's greatest triumphs and heartbreaks. All right, let's keep going.
For English supporters in the mid-2000s, the idea of football coming home actually felt incredibly believable. This wasn't just blind, patriotic hope. This was a squad packed to the brim with Ballon d'Or contenders and massive global superstars. But there was a staggering paradox at the heart of this era. On one hand, you had unprecedented club success. Steven Gerrard, Frank Lampard, Paul Scholes, Rio Ferdinand, David Beckham, Michael Owen, these guys were dominating the Premier League and conquering the Champions League. Juxtaposed against that was sheer international failure. They suffered agonizing quarterfinal exits in 2002 and 2006, suffocated by a rigid international system that failed entirely to unlock their collective potential.
So why did this super team fail so consistently on the global stage? Well, the primary issue was chemistry and balance. National team managers stubbornly stuck to a traditional rigid 4-4-2 formation. Because Frank Lampard and Steven Gerrard were both dynamic, surging attacking midfielders who loved to get forward, they clashed constantly in the center of the pitch, leaving huge gaps behind them. To accommodate both of them, Paul Scholes, arguably the most gifted technical player and passer of his generation, was bafflingly pushed out to the left wing, effectively neutralizing his influence. Furthermore, fierce, deeply ingrained club loyalties between Manchester United, Chelsea, and Arsenal created silent cliques that fractured the dressing room. They just couldn't put aside their weekend rivalries. All of this unfolded under a suffocating blanket of unprecedented tabloid pressure, culminating in another devastating penalty shootout loss to Portugal in 2006 following a Wayne Rooney red card.
It leaves football historians and fans alike screaming at the history books. What if the golden generation had just abandoned the 4-4-2? What if managers had built a modern, dynamic system centered around Paul Scholes pulling the strings in the middle, and the players had simply checked their club egos at the door?
Section 5. Modern Margins of Defeat. Ghost Goals and Missed Penalties. The agonizing reality for recent England squads is that defeats are no longer just about systemic, deep-rooted failures. They are about microscopic, split-second lapses and literal inches. In 2010 against Germany, we saw the ultimate ghost goal. Frank Lampard fired a magnificent shot from the edge of the box that hit the crossbar and bounced a full yard over the goal line before spinning back out into the goalkeeper's arms. It would have tied the game at 2-2 right before halftime, but the referee, distracted by a previous tackle, and the linesman, tracking back late, completely missed it. The goal wasn't given, the momentum flatlined, and England collapsed to a 4-1 defeat. The worldwide outrage was so severe that it literally forced FIFA to finally introduce goal line technology. Fast forward to the Gareth Southgate era. The toxic culture was repaired and genuine hope was restored to the nation, but the heartbreak simply evolved. In the 2018 semifinal against Croatia, a split-second lapse in concentration by defender John Stones allowed Mario Mandzukic to sneak in behind him and score the extra-time winner, ending a miraculous run. Then, in the 2022 quarterfinal against reigning champions France, the ultra-reliable captain Harry Kane stepped up for a late, high-pressure penalty to tie the game. Facing his Tottenham teammate Hugo Lloris, Kane aimed for pure power, but his technique faltered just enough, and the ball sailed wildly over the bar into the stands.
Once again, we end a chapter wondering what could have been done differently. What if Kane's penalty had gone just a fraction lower, under the crossbar instead of over. What if that one strike had been precise? Could that modernized, tactically coherent, and highly united 2022 squad have gone all the way?
Section 6. Will it ever come home? The compounding weight of history.
Every missed penalty, every red card, every ghost goal is not just an isolated event in a vacuum. It's a compounding trauma. The weight of the England shirt grows heavier with every failed campaign. Yet England's World Cup story isn't just about losing. It's about believing, hoping, and coming back every 4 years with dreams of making history. The question is no longer whether England has suffered heartbreak, but whether the next World Cup will finally end it. Thanks for watching Flop Files.